Hey everyone, it's Jeff, and I'm a little bit late on this one because it's like 2 days ago, the first game they played, but Aaron Gordon and the Denver Nuggets. And obviously, this is really important because if it works out, right, Gordon could potentially be the missing piece for the Denver Nuggets. As in, like, the best case scenario for him is this is the guy who takes the Nuggets to the next level and makes them like actual contenders instead of just being like that second tier team behind like the Lakers or the Clippers or, whatever. And it's ironic that I said the Clippers because they beat them last year, of course. But, you get my point. Let's see. So offensively, right, this game against the Hawks, second quarter, the Nuggets just like blew the Hawks out of the water. They went on like a 17-4 run. And obviously, it's Gordon's first game, so the playbook was significantly simplified. And if you watched that game, you would have noticed that there were a lot of quick shots just early in the shot clock and just basic simple cuts. And normally, right, this wouldn't be something where you're like super excited about because, you haven't really seen just how Gordon kind of works his way into the offense yet, right? We haven't really seen it fully fulfilled. However, I do think that, it showed us something that's pretty important and interesting. And it's this kind of, this problem of how do you deal with five guys on the court who are all just dangerous? Because, their lineup was in the second quarter when they went on that big run was Jokic plus Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Will Barton, and Aaron Gordon. And it's kind of crazy because like all five of those guys can go off the dribble, and that's insane. Like back with the Magic, right? A lot of the times Aaron Gordon would be the second or third best off the dribble creator on the team. And often even the first best sometimes when Evan Fournier was injured or something like that. And like from the perimeter, Gordon would just be the only guy who was forced to do a lot of stuff. But on the Nuggets, right, for that five-man lineup right there, he's probably the worst one out of all of them. And when you have five guys like that all at the same time, you can really just take advantage of matchups. It's almost like if you've ever played like my team in 2K, you know how you get that conundrum sometimes where you have five guys out there and they're all really good, they're all super high overalls, and like you almost don't know which player to use to get a basket because you can score with all of them. That was almost what the Denver Nuggets was kind of like when they were playing the Hawks. Like that's what it felt like to me. It felt like they could have gotten off a decent shot every possession because you can't have five guys all out there who are just great defenders. It's impossible. Well, at least impossible for the Hawks because if Trae Young's out there, there's going to be a mismatch. And it felt like Denver was just kind of passing the ball. They're just like swinging the ball around until they find a person who has like a weak defender on them, like Kevin Huerter, who isn't a terrible defender, but he's not, particularly great, or Trae Young specifically, and they just went at them. And they were able to just keep on scoring and scoring. It was like relentless because there was just so much offensive pressure from those five guys out there. Because like I said, no matter who has the ball, they're a threat to just go off the dribble, make a tough shot, or just, initiate a play. And like all five of them can shoot too. And like I said, this is like the super simplified version of the Nuggets offense, right? Like that was like algebra 2 compared to the usual calculus Denver likes to do. Like, they weren't really utilizing Michael Porter Jr. in a kind of off the catch, off the screen type shooter because Gordon doesn't know the plays yet, right? So he doesn't know where to set the screens, stuff like that. But it was still, working very well. And like Aaron Gordon wasn't setting screens and rolling to the basket as much as he, would be doing in the Nuggets offense if like a few games down the road because, like I said, he doesn't know the plays yet. So like, the Denver Nuggets players weren't even necessarily like just playing to their complete strengths yet because, they're trying to incorporate someone in their offense still. And so when we think about like what their offensive ceiling could look like, it's pretty scary, right? Considering like Gordon could potentially add another dimension to their offense when it comes to just being a vertical threat and release valve because, the Nuggets, they've never had someone like that before. They've had like Paul Millsap and Jeremy Grant, who's a decent athlete, but he's not like a super vertical explosive guy like Gordon is, of course. And like once again, this just brings me back to like all the different avenues you can score now when you have five guys like that out there. And Gordon has some like Draymond Green to his game where you can initiate plays through him, and I wouldn't call him like a play initiator completely because like I don't think you can do consistently. Like you can't just throw the ball to him and make plays, right? But you can use him to make decisions for your offense, right? Where it's like he's at the elbow or he's rolling to the basket and he has to either hit the opposite corner or, dump it off to the dunker spot or just take a layup himself. I think Gordon can do that because, the Magic have given him a lot of responsibility over the years, so he's improved that part of his game. And like I don't know if it'll, fully come to fruition, but you can see how like the actual, the ceiling, the best case scenario for this Nuggets team is like best offense in the entire league by a mile. But obviously, if you're going to incorporate someone like Aaron Gordon, other players on the team that make sacrifices, and so does Gordon, of course. And let's talk about his fit next to some of the other guys. For starters, like Will Barton, like he's a great player, of course, but I felt like he was getting a little bit too full of himself a little bit, or there were some plays with the Nuggets where I feel like, he was taking the shot like with like 10 seconds off the shot clock. And like, I love Will Barton's energy and just, his offensive juice, I guess. But if there's Jokic, Gordon, Michael Porter, and what's his face, Jamal Murray on the court too, Will Barton would be my first choice to take a shot like that. So like maybe Barton needs to chill a little bit considering he's best as a ball handler who's not particularly like elite catch and shoot 3-point shooter. But like I said though, he does give them that kind of off the dribble skill set, which can be really deadly when you have like 5 guys who can all do it. So like fit's not ideal, but like the fit is never ideal in the NBA, so it's perfectly fine. More interestingly though is Michael Porter Jr. because like I think on offense, putting Gordon in, you're moving Porter to small forward. And that's fine because he's good enough of a shooter to play small forward on offense. And even if he was never particularly like super quick anyways, so it wasn't like he was beating people off the dribble as a power forward against like slower guys. And I think even in some cases it could help him because now he's a small forward, he's being guarded by guys who are shorter, right? So he'll have an easier time shooting over people, and he's like 6'11", so like good luck guarding that. But defensively though, it is kind of a question for me because I don't think Porter is just like quick enough to guard small forwards on defense. And I know like small forward and power forward is not that big of a distinction, but it does push Porter more onto the wing, I think. And it just forces him to guard guys more on the perimeter. And I'm not exactly happy about that because he's not that quick of a guy. He's not the most like fluid when it comes to just being defensive, being in a consistent defensive stance and just making the right defensive decisions. He's a young player. He takes bad angles. I think taking bad angles is like the quintessential young player mistake, I guess, where you're just not in the right place at the right time, or maybe you are there, but you're just opening your body up the wrong direction and your opponent just gets a really easy blow by because you're just in a bad position like that. But obviously, like, Gordon is good enough to play defense, like small forward, so he can just guard those guys. And, the Nuggets did have like a 95 defensive rating against the Hawks when it was Gordon plus like Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic. So, like, Gordon, Jokic, and Porter are the 3 guys on defense who I'm most interested in seeing if this will work. And they were fine against the Hawks, so maybe it's not that big of a deal at all. But I did notice against the Hawks, though, like, they weren't really clamping them up so much as Atlanta was just taking unforced bad shots. Like, I feel like the Hawks were just taking a lot of shots that were just not super quality looks, and they weren't terrible looks. They were like semi-open. They were okay shots by NBA standards, right? Like Trae Young was taking a bunch of just pull-up 3-pointers, and they were taking some pretty like contested-ish layups. And NBA players can hit those, of course, but they're not your first choice, of course. And I feel like Denver wasn't necessarily like forcing them into those shots so much as Atlanta was just doing it to themselves, because they took quite a lot of them just like early in the shot clock. So like I'm saying, I'm not sure how much of their defensive like excellence against Atlanta was the Hawks' own like just offensive mistakes or Aaron Gordon making a huge defensive impact, because like to be honest, he wasn't really like that incredible on defense against Atlanta. He wasn't bad for sure, but I just didn't really notice anything like particularly amazing. I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure he had some great plays where he was just able to stay in front of Trae Young and just walled someone off and get into the basket and looked amazing. And of course, it's like defensively where Gordon's impact with Denver might be the most important, because they lost Jeremy Grant and Torrey Craig and Mason Plumlee, right? And Paul Millsap, a few years ago, he was great for them, but he's aging now, and they really needed that like other front court defensive presence that could help with Jokic's, defensive deficiencies, because like Jokic, he's a smart defender. He's just not athletic enough to, be in position sometimes. He's slow to rotate because he's just, too slow, or someone will drive to the basket and they'll just jump, and Jokic just can't jump high enough to contest well enough. So like similarly to the offense, I think Gordon could take on that Draymond Green role for them on defense too, where you can see how like the upside with Gordon is he can just be like switching everywhere and also be protecting the paint and just kind of being that like Swiss Army knife that Draymond Green is. I thought that in Orlando, although it wasn't super consistent, there were definitely a lot of games and plays where he was able to do that, and you can see how like there's the potential for him to do that every single game. And I think that Denver's reached a point where they're kind of hoping that Gordon is that missing piece for them, and that he's kind of like the last big move or trade that they need to make in order to make themselves contenders. And although I'm not 100% sure it's going to work out, right? Because you never know. I do think there's a great chance that he is that guy because like he's definitely got the skills and tool set to do that. I think, in a few more games or a few more weeks, I'll probably do another video about Michael Porter Jr. and like maybe Bol specifically because he does throw a wrench into their kind of plans to develop MPJ into being, I don't know, like the second or third guy. Because it's still very unsure like just what role MPJ is going to take because like right now he's taking that kind of catch and shoot like 19 points per game scorer, but it's pretty obvious he has the potential to do a lot more than that. And Bol is obviously still just like this mystery act. We still don't quite know what they have in him yet. And like Gordon might step in and be like the third guy and start taking away opportunities from Michael Porter. They had some like surprisingly good chemistry though against Atlanta, so it could very well just work out extremely well.